Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well. Hi, Katie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm so excited to get to talk to you today.
Yeah, me too. Katie Sweetman, welcome to Ace of Pentacles.
Thank you for having me.
Katie, you are a New York-based astrologer currently living in Maryland. You started your consultancy in 2010 to help people use astrology to uncover their purpose and meaning in life. Katie, according to you, everyone shows up here with a map, with a blueprint for their lives. And I'm so fascinated by just the way that you speak about astrology. I really appreciate the way that you make it really accessible. You have your podcast, Empowering Astrology, which I love listening to. I found you last year when I was getting very curious about how people figure out what to do with their lives. What are the different resources and different types of data that we use to navigate life. So I'm so happy to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, astrology is something that I was always interested in. And, for a lot of people, astrology is just something that is sun sign astrology. Sun sign astrology is I'm a Pisces, I'm a Libra, but I think it's a very natural human condition to want to seek and search for answers. And early on, I sort of realized that astrology, as I knew it at that time, there was sort of this barrier. It's like, great, you can tell me who I am. What can astrology do beyond that? And we all go through critical points in our life, and some of these ages are actually predictable. It's why we culturally call things like the quarter life crisis, the midlife crisis. Doesn't have to be a crisis. But this idea that we get to certain ages and we're reaching out more to figure out, why am I here? What is the meaning and purpose of my life? Which I realize that's a big question that typically astrology is not what we think would answer, nor do I think astrology necessarily has concrete answers. I think astrology is just a framework to open up something within you to be able to find those answers. So for me, astrology is time, how we live time. And as you were saying, this idea of a blueprint or a map. And so when I started to realize, it's not an original thought, I'm sure there's other astrologers out there that know this, but that the chart, meaning this exact moment that you're born, creates a snapshot of the heavens. And that gives one like a map. It's not a cheat sheet. It doesn't tell you all the answers. It doesn't predict what you're going to have for lunch, but it gives you this framework for your life. And I went through one of those sort of key ages that we all go through, 28, 29, 30, and I had some big questions to answer. And astrology helped me to at least orient myself in that direction, and help me to start to answer big questions about my life and perhaps what I'm here to do. So I try, as you sort of alluded to, I try to use it as a very grounded tool and communicate it very groundedly, and for people to look at it as time and the energy of time and how we live time. But as I say on my podcast, the astrology is 50%, you're the other 50%. So, and maybe that's something that you've really sort of, because we've worked together, but also listening to my podcast, how that maybe has shifted your perspective of astrology a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. I spent most of my life believing astrology was just like, what you read in the magazines, or like, what's this year going to be like for you, Capricorn, right? And I never understood where that information came from or anything until I found you. So Katie, let's start here. Let's start with, who are you? How did you find your way to where you are today? Tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Yeah, believe it or not, I have a background in IT and graphic design. I graduated as people do, and like, what do I do? I guess I'll do this. And it was, something to pay the bills, as one does. But going back to those critical ages, you're like, is this what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life? And so who am I? I think that's a question that we're all asking ourselves at different stages. And I would have maybe answered this a little bit differently if you had asked me this question 15 years ago or 20 years ago. But I think the core constant is I am somebody who feels a desire to help and to help people, and using astrology as a tool to help people to uncover their map, to uncover their direction and the role that they can play in this life. So I, again, have a background in IT and graphic design. Astrology was just something that I was interested in since a teenager. And I tell people this is not typically the origin story that we would expect with astrology, but it's actually my father that got me into astrology. And he is a West Point grad, an engineer. Again, not the person you would expect would be interested in this, but there were astrology books in the house growing up, and I'm about to date myself, but I got a computer my freshman year of high school, and this was pre-Windows. Like I said, I'm about to date myself. And he put DOS-based astrology software on the computer, and it calculated the chart, and I'm like, what is this? And so the kind of began my journey of trying to decode this very strange looking image and all these different symbols, and this idea that this image had some sort of secret for me or discovery for me. But over time, I realized that it didn't have the hard and fast answers that I perhaps wanted it to have. And I think as a younger person, certainly as an adolescent, I used that chart as a reflection of like the worst things about myself. Like, oh, this is true about you because this is what you have in your astrology chart. But I realized that was the human side of me that was looking at this and looking at it negatively. So it's empowering astrology, my brand, the work that I do, because the things I was reading at that time that maybe were published in the 60s or 70s would speak in these very difficult absolutes. Meaning, if you have this, these terrible things are going to happen to you. And so when I got into my 20s, and I'm a young woman, I'm living in New York and sort of going through life and believing a lot of things about myself and sort of seeing astrology as the confirmation of the worst things about myself. Astrology is way beyond the individual, the personality, but that's where we often start with astrology. And when I started to realize that there was different ways of looking at it, that there was different disciplines in astrology that use it as a tool, as a healing tool, as a personal development tool, that's when it began to open up for me. And because I'm the daughter of an engineer, I guess, I have a very analytical mind, but I'm also an art major. And I just started to deconstruct astrology and sort of take some of these truths that I read in books, and I was like, actually, I don't think this is true. Or maybe it could be true if you're living your life in a very sort of narrow line. So I started my consultancy in 2010. I started working with people on the side, and thus, like a lot of people, it was my side hustle. And then at one point, you know that you just have to pull the trigger. You just can't keep doing something. And, I got to that point in 2019 where I had to do one of the hardest things in my life, which is to go against everything that I've been taught. You stay in your job, you keep your health care, you don't do crazy things like quit your job to become an astrologer. But it's important, I'll phrase it this way. I'm a very practical and grounded person, but I'm not so practical and grounded that I'm going to betray myself. So I think it's a truth for a lot of people. Of course, we need to pay the bills and keep the lights on, but everything comes at a cost. So I had somewhat of a luxury to be able to make that choice in 2019, almost a year to the date of the start of the pandemic in New York City. So it was a very strange time to be rebooting my career. But it sort of put me into this. I already had everything organized. I was already working from home. I already had the lights. I already had I already had the Zoom account. So I was a little bit ahead of the curve. But what I've done, I think, in the last 6 years, because it has been 6 years since I've quit my day job, is to really begin to occupy a space where I can work with people at an increasingly higher level. I'm not here to be anybody's truth or supplant their own free will. I'm here to just be a support and be the intermediary between what I believe is this framework of your life, because the chart, it's a map, it's a blueprint, but in a way it reflects the body of your life, because the body of your life is built on time and the time that you live. And we all know, even if we don't believe in astrology, that time can be spent in quality ways or very difficult ways. And that part is like, how do we work with the different seasons of our life? So, long answer to a short question.
Oh, no, that was a beautiful answer, Katie. Um, it, there's so much there that I want to dig into, but I will just say you mentioned that your kind of brand and part of your brand is, the astrology is 50% and you're 50%. And I think I had this idea in my head from maybe from folks that I know who see astrologers. Sometimes, like, you'll hear people say, oh, my astrologer told me that I can't buy a house this year, or my astrologer told me not to do this year, right? And I think I just had that, yeah. I think I had this idea that the astrologers are just like giving people answers to their lives. So when I came to meet with you about my birth chart, it was the first time that I had a birth chart reading done. I was like, oh, this is great. I was like, this lady's gonna be like, do this, do that, right? And
Don't buy a house.
right, don't buy a house. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. So then I'm sitting there and I remember this moment in our conversation where you were like, well, Sarah, what do you want to do? And I was like, what do you mean, what do I want to do? What does my birth chart tell me to do? And you were like, no, that's not how this works.
No, it doesn't work that way. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so I appreciated that because you are very much a coach. You are someone who inquires about the individual, and you do really live that 50%. The astrology is 50% and you're 50%. So
Yeah, there are no bad birth charts. And I'm saying this as a 14-year-old that read, according to my astrology, that there was a likelihood I'd be in a mental hospital. Mind you, there's still time. But you read these things, especially when you don't have to be 14 and impressionable. You could be in a very dark space in your 40s. You could be questioning life. And so I think this is just more of a comment, not just on astrology or astrologers. It's a lot of different industries where we give our power away. Trust your heart, trust your intuition. Your intuition is always talking to you, even if you're not listening to it. So I ask that question, like, what do you want? And sometimes that's a very radical question because it's something that we've never contemplated. What do you want within this space, the space of your life? I cannot change where you were born, the circumstances, your lived history, other things that really shape the reality of our life. But how do you work within that space? So if not you, but if one knows that, because there's a certain astrology transit, that this is the time that you're in, let's say it's a time where you need to deconstruct your life. That's not always easy. And especially if we know it intuitively, but we're like, of course I'm not going to deconstruct my life. And so a lot of my job is to confirm what people already know. They're like, oh, right, it's time to deconstruct my life. It's Pluto. But I use the astrology not to sort of pathologize or use a planet as a scapegoat. To go back to this comment, like my astrologer said, not to buy a house. I have a friend who's in the process of buying a property in Spain. And I said to her, look, as your astrologer, it is Mercury retrograde. It is Venus retrograde. Maybe you wait just a month or two to put in an offer. She didn't. That's her choice. She felt that was right for her. We will see what happens. But I just said to her, cross your I's, dot your T's. Wait, that's mixing my metaphors. And also get an inspector, go to Spain, do these practical things. But for me, I want to use my own time here on this earth, not just to make myself a better person, but how can I give back? How can I have a positive impact? And that's, as you can see, we're going way beyond on today, your horoscope for Gemini is this. You will meet somebody. It's trying to use it at again, as an increasingly higher level.
Yeah. Katie, one of the things I was really intrigued by, or really, I guess, surprised to learn, was in all my research about all these different tools that people use, and astrology specifically, I learned that the global astrology market is like over $13 billion. And I was so surprised by this because I was like, wow, people are spending a lot of money trying to figure out like what the planets and the stars are telling them.
Right.
And this is apps and readings and services related to astrology. So Katie, what kinds of things do people come to you for? What kind of questions do they
No,
ask you?
that's a great question, but I do want to quickly add that part of that 13 billion global market is going to include different countries where astrology plays a very different role. And I would even though we're not talking about astrology in this case, whether it's feng shui or you're in China and you wouldn't even think of building a property without consulting somebody. Or in India, you wouldn't even think about striking a business without consulting an astrologer. So it's also to look at the cultural roots in different countries with astrology. Of course, I'm in the United States, so I come from a very different culture, and so for me, I think this is, people are coming to me more of I feel stuck. What does my chart say is my purpose? I tell people, well, I can not tell you your purpose, but at least I can see what the chart hints at. The rest is up to you. People are sometimes in a difficult spot. They need to feel some hope. They want to feel like there's some practical tools that can help them to move forward. But very often it is the love, money, relationships, and career. That's the nexus. So I have to sort of, I really respect the role that I have to play because I'm in people's lives. I can't tell people to leave a relationship or leave their career, but it's, again, to put them in the reality of the time that they're in, just so they have more things to reflect on so that they can make the decisions that are best for them.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna go a few steps back now. For the people who are listening, who are watching, who still don't know, like, what is astrology and what is a birth chart? Tell us, what is all of that?
So at the exact moment that you're born, you can take a snapshot of the heavens. And the astrology chart that's created, it's calculated. Back in the olden days, it was calculated by hands. One can still do that, but it takes time. But these days we have apps, we have online charts that can be generated, and that exact moment creates a framework. For me, this framework is a couple of different analogies. It is the framework of the time of your life. It has north, it has a south, and east to west. It has a starting point, it has an ending point. That starting and ending point can be lived in a day. That starting and ending point can be the entirety of your life, maybe long, God willing. But also this idea that the position of the planets are not doing anything to you. They sort of are symbolic representations of an invisible structure. People sometimes will say to me, well, time's an invention, but there are constants in time that aren't an invention, meaning, as we record this, it's nighttime in Asia or in Australia, for example. That's a reality. Time zones are a reality, even though they're constructed. But we all have the sunset, the sunrise, we have the noon, we have the midnight. And so your life has these 4 points, and these are what I call the 4 pillars. So your astrology chart represents you, home and family, relationships, and career. And as you can imagine, as you asked in that previous question, what do people come to you? They come to me about yourself, home and family, relationships, and career. And these are the 4 main points of our chart that we really want to make sure are stable and grounded, because when they're not, it creates suffering. I don't know where to live, Katie, or I don't know what's going on in this relationship, for example. But to go back to your question, this idea that the sun, which we all typically know with astrology, that's just an archetype. It's just an energy. Of course, I'm a Scorpio. I get 100 Scorpios in a room together. We're all different people. There aren't just 12 people in the world, but there are these like myriad and multitudes of combinations of energies. So for me, the zodiac is the wheel of life. And so the position of the planets, position of the zodiac talks to me about the wheel of your life. And it tells me, where are you within this wheel? Where's your sun? The moon. The moon is the other side of the coin, is your wants and your needs and your desires. What do you need to feed yourself with? What does your life need? There's Venus, relationships, how you connect and socialize and interact with people. Mars, what inspires you, motivates you, where's your courage and bravery? Jupiter, how do you make your world bigger? Do you go get a PhD? Do you travel the world? Do you ask questions? Saturn, how do you create discipline and structure? How do you learn the lessons of your life? Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, these are planets that are modern in nature, since they were not known by the ancients, but they talk about the evolution and growth of ourselves, and if you believe in a soul, the evolution and growth of our soul. So these positions then become like key codes. And they just reflect the building blocks of life. Whether you're looking at the building blocks of life from a scientific level, DNA and amino acids, or you're looking at the building blocks at the time of your life. And so you will develop a different relationship with all those different key codes. So when I sit down and I look at a chart, it tells me this is the field of action. It also has something called a rising sign or an ascendant. This idea that there's a constellation that's rising in the east at the moment that you take your first breath. And that creates a setting for your life. It could be Virgo, it could be Scorpio, it could be Leo. And it gives me a sense of like, what is this person becoming? Because even though we're human beings, we're not unlike the natural world. We have a sense of like, we have a head and arms and two legs, I hope. And that, through this life, we are growing up to become something. And that things take time. Sometime, the time of your life will be different than my life. And what do we do at that time, but also what are we becoming? So I like to get into these richer spaces that are very different than, well, just tell me what's going to happen, Katie. And I think sometimes there is a little bit of frustration because I thought you would just give me the answers to my life. But I'm like planting very subtle seeds so that at the right moment, a little light bulb's going to go off maybe a couple years after we've spoken, like, oh, that's what she was talking about. So what do I do as an astrologer? I look at this map, I look at this blueprint, but I also use another analogy, is that it's like a house. That it is the space of your life, and that space is not unlike a house, and this house has 12 symbolic rooms. Where's the money room? Everybody wants to know where the money room is. Where's the career room? Where's the relationship room? And so sometimes people say to me, well, do I get a relationship? Does my chart say I'm going to have a relationship? And that's like asking the kitchen if you can have dinner. So we all have a relationship room. You got to get out there at least, but there's a time and place for everything. So I'm more of a, to go back to your question, I'm more of a why astrologer. I want to get into the big questions. I want to get into the substance that fills the time of your life, so that my work, even if it's a short, we only speak once, so we only have a short time together, that it becomes like a positive spark. It is to help you to remember deep down inside who you are. We all have the answers within. I know that sounds, like a cop-out or like an Instagram theme, but we truly do have the answers within. We live in a world where we don't listen to ourselves and listen to our hearts at our peril. And I think also part of what I do is to help people to listen to that subtle voice within. So maybe the world would be a better place, or people would at least be happier. But the beauty and sometimes the creepiness of astrology is that there are these times where the astrology is trying to wake us up. And that part, sometimes I get people right on the edge of something. And it's not to predict something like, oh, astrology is magic, she predicted this. The astrology has these fail-safes. It has these points that's trying to like, oh, I see you've spent 20 years forgetting who you are. Here we go, we're at a checkpoint. So it's a very broad way of saying what I do. And part of what I also do is to educate people about what astrology is and what it isn't, because there's a very strong cultural layer certainly even in the United States, of what astrology is. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't wear a head wrap. I don't sort of like intuit the answers, but it's just to be a bridge and a link for you.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I think the way you speak about what is astrology is helpful for me, because then I know as a customer, as a client, to know what to come to you for, and it helps to set expectations. So that's super helpful. This might be a little bit more of a technical question, but you speak about astrology as time. And I want to know, how is that? You speak about it like the energetics of time. And I want to know how is that different from lived time, like years and months and days and weeks of our lives?
So it's both the same and not the same. So time as an energy, and that time is created by the earth. The earth, of course, goes around the sun, and so we have sunset, sunrise, midday, sunset, and midnight. So again, these 4 points. So time is an energy that will always, like, the earth is not going to speed up. If it does, we're in danger. But it is always going to be that constant of time. But we live time differently. Does it seem funny that, like, each year time feels more quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker? And maybe you'd say, well, we're an adult and maybe that's just a function of being an adult, but our world just seems to be spinning faster. But it's not spinning faster, because again, if it were literally spinning faster, we would be in trouble. The earth would not work. So time is both an energy and a constant, but time as an energy that has a subjective quality. You will live your day today as we're recording this. So you may live it stressed, you may live it rushed, you may live it quiet, you may live it whatever. And you may choose to live it in a way. I want to really set this intention that I do things today that are only nourishing, that are really kind of fulfilling my cup. So that's where time is subjective, and you've made a choice in how you live time. But there are certain things that we can't control. We can't control the seasons, we can't control the weather, and maybe it's a difficult period of your life. So what do you do? So this idea that then you have a sense of choice of how you are going to live this time. And time, and this is where more the energetics of it, more the subjective quality of it, time then becomes a prism for the astrology. Astrology it's first and foremost a calendar. It tells us when to plant, it tells us when to harvest, it tells us when to store our grains for winter, it tells us when to celebrate the seasons. And so there is, again, that sort of practical side of astrology, the cultural side of astrology. But this idea that our experience of time perhaps can be colored. There will be a solar eclipse as we record this in 2 days. How will that impact how we live time? From the perspective of astrology, the presence of a solar eclipse isn't just astronomical. It is a lens in which we experience time, and from the solar eclipse, which is a very important point in the astrology of the year, it punctuates the time that going forward from March 29th, when we will, it will still be the 29th on the West Coast, but March 29th is this time when we have this new beginning, where over the next 6 months, which is from one eclipse to another, we will be living a different period of time, different chapter of time. It's like on a larger calendar beyond the month, we sort of turn this larger page. And this eclipse will be in the sign of Aries. And so Aries as a zodiac sign, but as an archetype, then becomes a lens for this energy of new beginnings. We will be inspired, hopefully, to take action, to start over, to find our courage and bravery, to really stand up for yourself. These are all Aries archetype and energies. Hopefully not too frustrated or rushed or argumentative. That's another side of Aries, but it's just an energy, and it's an energy that's present. This archetype of Aries is present everywhere. It's not just when the sun is in Aries. When you wake up in the morning and you open your eyes, that's the archetype of Aries. You're starting your day. So that's to show how now we're getting into more of the subjective and energetic and symbolic relationship with time. And so astrology is measuring our metaphoric and symbolic relationship with time. Which sometimes is a little bit of a leap for people, because this idea that a zodiac, which feels man-made, is somehow affecting my life. But it's just to sort of sit with this and to listen for it. And if it resonates with you, great. If you feel that, wow, in the spring, I realize, perhaps we're different hemispheres listening to this this podcast, but spring, at least in the northern hemisphere, is Aries. The sun has gone into Aries, so we want to do spring cleaning. We want to freshen things up. We want to, we put symbols of bunnies and chickens and rabbits and green grass, and we celebrate the renewal of life. And I think goes very deep in the human psyche, like eons and eons ago. And so astrology is just a reflection of that. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Speaking of time, I want to go back to something that you said earlier. We all go through periods of our lives where it's like time to kind of revisit what are the decisions that we've made, and am I doing the right thing? And especially for, you went through this and I went through this, where it's like, okay, like, do I need to make a change, right? For folks who are, this is a career strategy podcast, and so some of my listeners might be like, why is there an astrologer on here? And we're going to connect that dot right now. For folks who are feeling really lost in their careers, or really not sure where to go or what their purpose is and how to find meaning in the work that they do, I think finding that meaning and that purpose can bring a lot of wellness into your life.
Absolutely.
How would you guide them? Just really high level, like, where would you tell them to look? What kind of guidance might you provide for someone like that?
So first I need to talk to them. Career, there's different ways in which we can break this down. There's the sense of this role that we play so that we can provide for ourselves and provide for our family and to create stability and security for our life. Then there is career as a title. This is who I am. This is the role that I play in this world. But I've had a lot of conversations with people at this point in my career, especially people even in high levels of their career, and I hear it over and over again. There could be a layoff, there could be uncertainty in their career, and they realize they have built a whole identity around this position. It could be they could have been in the same company for 20 years. They built an identity around the power that they had. So I need to speak to somebody not just as, how are you going to make more money? How are you going to be more successful? I need to talk to the human being. And a lot of times, a layoff can be a wake-up call. Uncertainty, economic uncertainty within their career can be a wake-up call. Because sometimes the role that we've been playing, and this is where the astrology is 50% of, like, and they're the 50%, but in reality, the 50% that's them or you or me is conscious, subconscious, unconscious. And you're like, but I was told since I was 5 that I would grow up and become a lawyer or a doctor, or this is what we do, this is who we are. And then people realize, and typically it's in their 40s, or sometimes there's a health crisis or something else happens in their life where they realize, oh, I don't actually want to do this. And that's terrifying because they have to pay the bills, they have to provide for their family, and again, economic security is real, like keep the lights on. So I need to work with the human being, and maybe this is, as you said, this is the coaching part. It's like, how do we open up different avenues? How do we start to identify a different role they want to play in the world? Because what we're now speaking about is purpose. Purpose is, if we were happy enough as human beings just to punch a clock and get a paycheck, there would be no coaching business. There would be no $9 billion industry. It's because human beings at the core of their being are searching for meaning and purpose. I realize a lot of people just want meaning and purpose to lay on a beach and not have to worry. And you know what? Maybe that is your meaning and purpose. It's not for me to say. But I think we need to also address the human element that is trying to find fulfillment in their life, so that, God forbid, they pass on and they don't feel, depending on what you believe in, it's like, what life did you leave behind? Because when people die, they don't typically say on their deathbed, wow, I really wished I worked 60-hour work weeks. I really wish I didn't spend time with my family. I really wish they realize that there's, maybe purpose is also beyond the office. So part of it is to help somebody discover how do they create more balance in their life, how to open up to a facet of their career or even another career in general that will help them to discover something that will actually resonate with their life. I would say resonate with their astrology, but I don't want to contradict anything that's in anybody's heart, So it is to help people to really connect to something that they feel that they want to get back to. I think a lot of people are searching on how to help in this world, how to have a positive impact in this world. And there's lots of different ways. So it's a question that doesn't have a very succinct answer because everybody is different. But at the same time, we're all human beings, and we're searching beyond the basics of material stability and security and, providing for ourselves and our family. We're seeking meaning and purpose. Most people, I think all people are, but I think we wake up to that reality at different points. So it's just to really be a bridge and support for people as they transition from one phase of their life and one lived identity, and to discover who they truly are and the role that they truly want to play in the world. There's lots of different tools, whether I know you do work with the Enneagram, there are people that astrology, numerology, or just even different types of coaching work. Astrology for me is just a 5,000-year-old framework. And it still works, but it is to use a framework to help people. So,
Yeah, I think the way I think about astrology after having met you, learned from you, is really, it's just a tool to help you reconnect with yourself, right? And to your point, sometimes we just forget. Like, we've spent so much time pretending to be someone else, whatever the world taught us to be or expected us to be. And it's a way to kind of find your way back to yourself. When I met with you last year, I was just leaving my corporate job, starting my coaching practice full time, and it was a very scary move. And I partly met with you because I was like, I knew I was going to put information out there in some way for people to learn how to figure out their lives. I mean, I was in HR and I was looking around Katie being like, wow, everyone's like miserable. And, everyone hates their jobs. How can I help? And so it was going to end up being a book, or I didn't know this at the time, but a podcast, right? And so when I met with you, I remember there was a moment in our conversation where you said, Sarah, you went through all the planets and all the 12 houses in my chart and kind of you kind of pointed out a few things that really stood out to you. And you were like, well, Sarah, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And I thought that was a very surprising comment because it was the first time I was having my birth chart read, and I was like, what are you talking about? You're telling me all the stuff I don't know. I don't know anything about these planets and these houses and this thing, right? And then afterwards, I didn't say this out loud, but I thought it. And then afterwards, I thought about that comment a lot. And I was like, you know what? She actually didn't tell me anything that I didn't already know. Like, some part of me in that conscious, subconscious, unconscious that you were just referring to, it was nothing that some part of me didn't resonate as, yeah, that's the truth about me.
Right. Yeah. I will sometimes see things in the chart that people are like, huh? And it's, regardless of what age you are, we haven't figured it all out. You know what I mean? There's still things that are a mystery to us about ourselves, and how somebody, and it could be an astrologer, it could even be a best friend, They see things in you that you either at that moment have an incapability to see about yourself or a refusal to see about yourself. I've had clients who there's a lot of artistic ability in the chart. It could express itself as art, but artistic abilities connects to creativity, and creativity is where we take the best of ourselves and we put into something, because there's only one you on planet Earth. You cannot be duplicated. Astrology is a moment in time, and that moment of time cannot be duplicated for 26,000 years. It's a very specific organization of the planets, but you are you. That's why two people born at the same time are two different people. So it's to really connect, and this might be a little bit esoteric for a business and career coaching podcast, but there's the spirit of you. Whatever you want to call that, whatever you think that is, there's the spirit of you. And that spirit lives within this astrology, and it's for you to uncover the parts of you that are unconscious. And you can do that with a therapist. And if you think about it, even therapy was, 100 years ago, really radical. But now, and certainly if you're a younger generation, like my parents wouldn't go to therapy because if you went to a therapist, it means there's something clinically wrong with you. But our age and even a younger generation, of course, they're going to go to therapy. So they sort of, there's a generational shift, and we start to realize that the answers aren't just physical. And so astrology just helps us to connect to something that isn't physical. It's not quantifiable in money or success or accolades. It gets into something different. It gets into the spirit of the person. So deep down inside, you have all the answers. So it's just to sort of wake you up a little bit and help you to remind that. But there are these moments where I see something in the astrology that people don't realize about themselves, and sometimes it is to help them to have permission to open that door. Because maybe the chart doesn't tell me that you had a bad childhood. The chart doesn't tell me that your mother was hypercritical, for example. Like it can hint at things. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes there's a real human reason why we haven't opened that door or even accepted that part of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That happened with me. You pointed out something in my chart and I was like, yeah, right. I was like, whatever, because I had written that off, and and then like a year later, something significant happened, or less than a year later, something pretty significant happened there. So yeah, that totally makes sense. It's because my own kind of resistance to it was showing up. Yeah, and then the thing that you said about therapy, and I don't know if a lot of people actually know this, but so I teach psychology, and it's always interesting for me to teach psychology from the perspective that I have, but I usually talk about the history of psychology in one of my first kind of lectures. And, these really famous psychologists, the people that like wrote the framework, and like we don't write psychology off as like woo-woo, but
Yeah.
William James, like Freud, Jung, William James especially was attending seances and talking to psychic mediums and trying to figure out how do we connect with like the world beyond and the spirit realm. And people don't talk about that. And Carl Jung, when I was going to school learning psychology, getting my degrees, we never talked about Jung because he was like too weird for all of the things that he was,
Exactly. The red
putting out
ball.
there. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, he was nonetheless, like he was, he has been a big influence in the field. And so it's interesting how our understanding of the arts and the sciences kind of shifts, over time.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm saying this as somebody who's not an expert in psychology or the history of psychology, but from what I understand, Jung is more, not Jung, Freud's more rational analytical, even though we're talking about the emotional body. But Jung is getting into the mystical. He's getting into the woo-woo. He actually was huge into astrology, and there was even a whole branch and lineage of astrology that comes out of Jung. Especially from Switzerland, which I think is where Jung is from. So this idea that there is the rational and analytical, the physical, the quantifiable, but there's also the subjective, the spiritual, the dreams, the things that cannot be quantified, and both exist. I sometimes tell people, you cannot prove your dreams to me. Even though your dream, like the EEG can say that you're having some sort of experience, or perhaps even an MRI, but you cannot prove your dream to me. So even at that level, we were having an experience that cannot be proven, that cannot be quantified. So you have your own internal life, and that internal life, whether you go to a psychologist, whether you go to a medium, whether you go, I think, like, again, as I said, like, we're all just searching for answers, and it doesn't mean that astrology has them or I have them, but I think we need to sort of look to different places, but of course maintain our grounding and maintain our sense of discernment. So yeah, astrology and certainly psychology, it comes out of that, late 19th century seances, spiritualism, theosophy, and it was really radical at the time. Now, not so much. And I think even though, to use a different discipline, acupuncture is 5,000 years old, I think, and even now it's like, oh, look at this thing we've discovered. I'm like, this has been around for a very long time, but we're the collective consciousness is starting to realize that life isn't just physical, and that maybe the answers are not just physical, and maybe they are energetic or emotional or spiritual if you believe in that. And this kind of gets into this idea that astrology, or at least a birth chart, doesn't tell me how conscious somebody is. And consciousness is not, a cognitive spectrum. Consciousness is an energy, and it's an energy that isn't just about self-awareness, but it's your awareness of the whole. And so this framework then becomes a framework for you to grow and evolve and to open up your consciousness. And that's the part where, whether I'm working with somebody who's on a career level or working with somebody on an astrology level, it's to help them to open up that awareness of themselves in the greater whole. Because nobody can take a pill and fix their life, or make some of these bigger questions go away, or even to answer these bigger questions. That part, we have to have some sort of tool and framework and inner work to be able to discover on our own.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, last question from me. What are some misperceptions that you come across as an astrologer that people have about the work that you do, and how can we help reframe that a little bit?
It's a great question, because the first one is that I have all the answers. And the follow-up to that is, it's not that it's because I'm not good at my job, or I'm trying to push away some sort of responsibility in what I do. It's that there are no absolutes in astrology. And just like the book that I was reading as a 14-year-old stated some very clear, from that person, the writer's perspective, absolutes that actually aren't absolutes. So the misperception is first to take away a lot of the cultural veneer. And what people don't realize is that newspaper horoscopes, I realize the newspapers aren't really truly a thing anymore, but they were invented in the 1930s. I know, that's a little less than 100 years ago. So in our grandparents' lifetime, or at least my grandparents' lifetime, they grew up with astrology being like something out of a newspaper. Astrology is, again, at least 5,000 years old, but our cultural veneer of it is something that I read that's very watered down and very vague. And in reality, the people that were writing the newspaper horoscopes were not astrologers. Mm-hmm. They were just writing something. And so there's a lot of disservice to astrology that comes from things that are just really deep in the cultural memory at this point. So I just need to do a lot of education. And I've had so many conversations with people. Not if they're coming to me and paying money, they're not these people, but somebody you meet at a cocktail party, or somebody you went to college with. They're like, oh, you're an astrologer now? I thought that was something, those little gas station scrolls that you buy about Aquarius or Libra. So it's to really help people to realize that there's this really rich framework, and that everybody has their own time. Don't you want to know your time? Don't you? What if life came with an instruction manual? What if life came with a map? Wouldn't you want to know your map? And just like a map doesn't tell you like exactly what's going to happen in certain places, it's just for you to orient yourself in life, because again, this is not to say astrology has all the answers, but there's a lot of suffering that happens when people feel like they don't belong, they don't have purpose, they're not grounded, they don't feel like they're going someplace in their life. And for me to go back to that really critical time in my life, 28, 29, 30, astrology helped me to begin to understand the why of what I was going through at that time. A lot of it was self-inflicted, like I lit the match, I can't blame the planets on that. But it helped me to understand perhaps the deeper motivations of that and perhaps where that was leading me. So it's to sort of shift away from a lot of our subconscious programming with astrology and to really help people to open up to a bigger perspective. Astrology these days, especially in the age of social media, especially in the last 15 years, it's even changed hugely in the time that I've been doing astrology. It's, I think, even a lot of the astrology that's being done on social media is not always very helpful. And to be honest, anybody can call themselves an astrologer these days. Me too. No, nobody came down from above and sort of like said, I dub you to be an astrologer. Yeah. But at this point, it is a space that I occupy. I have, thousands and thousands, thousands of hours of working with people, and I think we need to just see who's an expert in their field and have some discernment. And I think just with any industry, it's just to have really good discernment. So that's how I would answer that question. And I think finally, it's that on a cultural conscious, not just cultural level, on a collective consciousness level, we're only starting to just beginning to open up to what some of these tools truly are. And what they can do. And just I use psychology a lot as an example of what can happen in 100 years, just like the shift around healing and health and wellness. But there's a lot of complicated people out there that are positioning themselves as experts and leaders, and we just need to have some good discernment. Have some good discernment about me too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I did my research, and I would highly recommend anyone that wants to work with you. I found it actually very helpful. I found it enlightening to learn about my map, my blueprint, right? And I love listening to your podcast. So, Katie, if our audience wants to get in touch with you, if they want to get to work with you, where would they go?
Great question. You go to empoweringastrology.com. You can book a consultation with me. I have an online booking system. If you just want to, I do daily content 5 days a week. You can just read about the astrology. But that's the way in which you can get a little bit of a sense of who I am and what I do. I also have a podcast, as you had mentioned. It's linked on my website. It's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. Again, it's just to feel out how we can work together. And my role is just to be a support and a guide and to help you just to reconnect to who you are. So yes, empoweringastrology.com.
Wonderful. Before I officially thank you and let you go, Katie, when I emailed you and I was like, hey, what day do you want to do this? You said, I like the astrology of March 27th.
Why did you say that?
Why. I'd like to know why. Why is today's astrology so good?
Because of the dates you gave me, so astrology is first and foremost the engine of astrology is through the sun and the moon. New moon, full moon, where is the moon at any given time? And I think the date that you gave me before, the moon was in a different sign, like Aquarius. That was not, but I think I know the astrology right now. The moon is in Pisces, and I just know what that was pinging with my chart. And, it's about, for me at least, my own personal astrology, it's about the voice. It's about leadership and authority. It's about trying to communicate something and do it in a way that people can receive it and then hopefully understand it. Pisces is a very spiritual sign. It's the last sign of the zodiac, but it's also a sign that helps us to find universal themes. So that I love how astrology can really speak about universal themes that we all feel because we are all human beings. doing our best, I hope. And so that's why I like that. I like a little Pisces moon sometime. So
Awesome. Well, Katie Sweetman of Empowering Astrology, thank you so much for making the time and sharing your expertise with us today.
absolutely. And to be able to speak to an audience that might be a little bit different, but to go back to that earlier comment about this is just to speak to universal themes as humans, whether we're in the business world or an astrology world. So,
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Katie. Have a
thank
great
you.
rest of your day.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.